Hello everybody, this is Lara from Pure Elliott Wave with your update. Prices moving lower for all of them. I'm going to update Bitcoin and XRP for you. I'm going to go through a full Elliott Wave count for XRP to answer some questions. And let's have a look at what Bitcoin's doing. I've only had a look at price, so I'm looking at this with you. It's still within this rectangle. Resistance, 73,100, 71,500. Support. It's made a slightly lower low below the price point found on 24th of June, but it's still within the rectangle. Support 58,200 to 60,700. I have said before, and I will say it again, rectangles have multiple false breakouts quite commonly, so you've got to be pretty careful about your breakouts. Someone's asked me to tell them, what do I mean by a 2 or 3 day away rule? This is what I mean. Previously, early on in the rectangle, we identified support 60,700 and price closed comfortably below that. I thought this is a downward breakout and we could calculate a target from the width of the rectangle, but price very quickly returned back within the rectangle, so this was a false breakout. And what we do then is we expand the support zone, and I've added this lower support line at 58,200 to sit on the close and the open of these two candlesticks. This was a false breakout. It could happen again. So far, price is still within support at 58,200. If it closes below there, this is what I mean by a 2 or 3 day away rule. I want to see 2 or 3 red daily candlesticks moving price lower and away from the support area before I have confidence the breakout is not false, because we could see what happened here happen again. If price closes below 58,200, it could then quickly return back within the rectangle within 2 or 3 days. That's why 2 or 3 downward red candlesticks should be seen before having confidence there is indeed a breakout. I say 2 or 3 because if it's just 2 and they move quite a distance and they're very strong, then that will be enough. If they're not very strong and they've got small bodies and small range, then I would wait for 3 days downward. That's why I say 2 or 3. I hope that makes that clear. Now here's the other problem with the support zone. I've set the lower edge of support at 58,200 on the open and close of these candlesticks, but you could pull it lower to sit on the low of this candlestick for 1st of May. So you could pull it down to just about 56,500. That could be where we find final support, and the rectangle would remain a valid structure. Price would still be within this big sideways movement. I expect it's most likely that this is a second test of support. We had a double test of resistance back here. Price moved lower in a downward swing. We may be having another test of support. Price is still not broken out of the rectangle, so don't panic. If it does close below 58,200, then look for at least 2 or 3 days below before you really have confidence we're getting a downward breakout. If we get a downward breakout, I'll then calculate a short-term target from the rectangle for you, and I'll do that taking the widest part of the rectangle and adding that distance to the breakout point. That's how you do that. Right now, it looks most likely we're going to see an upward swing develop here or very, very soon. Downward movement doesn't have good push from volume, but New York's closed for the 4th of July, so we can't really read that too much into that today. Overall, for the short term, the volume profile is bearish for Bitcoin for the short term, but while price has been moving sideways in that big rectangle, volume has been declining, so this looks like a consolidation within the larger upward trend. For the very short term, it depends how you draw the short-term support line on on-balance volume. If you draw it from this pivot to this pivot, it slightly misses this pivot, and this line would have a bit more of a slope. So I'm going to draw it across these two pivots so that the line is much closer to flat and has slightly better significance. On balance volume is at support at this line. If it breaks below this line, that would be a very weak bearish signal. It would be too weak to give it much weight because the line is short held and has very few tests, only 2 or maybe 3 depending on how you draw it. ADX is again increasing, telling us there's a downward trend for the very short term. RSI reached oversold for the 24th of June. If we do see another low on the current session for the 4th of July, look at the close of the 24th compared to the close of the 4th of July. If price closes lower and RSI is higher, I would have quite a lot of confidence that some bullish divergence may be developing. But before I consider that, I want to see a pivot developed at the 4th of July low. So the next couple of sessions are going to be really important for Bitcoin. Wait for that pivot to develop before you consider divergence. That's a technique I've developed. I'm not seeing this in any textbooks. But over the years, I've seen so many times what you see is, or what you think is divergence, is developing, and it just disappears. It turns out to not be predictive of a high or a low at all. In order to filter out those instances, wait for your pivots on both RSI and price to develop, and then look at corresponding pivots compared to previous pivots, and then identify your divergence. So I think it's too early to say that there is divergence. What I will say is divergence might be developing, so I will look out for that. Just a little bit more patience, I think. Money flow neutral, there won't be, or there might be a bit of divergence here, but it didn't get down to oversold. It's a bit more sensitive than RSI. Sometimes it'll identify divergence when RSI doesn't, because it's got a volume component to its calculation. That's why I added in. I'm using it in exactly the same way, but that's why I've got both of them, not just one. ATR is pretty flat. So this still looks like a consolidation. It's been overall quite strongly declining as price moves sideways. So there's not a lot of strength in downward movement. It's not coming with overall an increase in volume or volatility. So it looks like a consolidation within a larger bull market. It doesn't necessarily look like the start of a bear market, even though price is at support. And I know people are probably panicking today. Just calm down. It's okay. It's just another test of support until proven otherwise. And if we do see a downward breakout, I will calculate a short-term downward target for you, but it'll be short-term. I still expect the bigger picture for Bitcoin is a bull market. But remember, price doesn't move in a straight line. It's really normal to see consolidations and pullbacks, and some of them can be time-consuming like this within the larger bullish picture. So just a recap of the bigger picture here. This is the low from November 2022. From this point, over a year and a half now. That's a long period of time. There's a series of higher highs, there's a series of higher lows. This is the last highest high on the week beginning 10th of March 2024. Previous to that highest high, here is the last highest low. So that basic pattern of higher highs and higher lows will remain intact while price remains above 38,512.34. And it's really normal to see these consolidations and these pullbacks along the way within the larger bullish trend. So at this stage, don't panic. It's absolutely entirely possible we could see price continue a bit lower. It could even test support about 55,000, could even test support about 51,800, and the larger trend would remain intact. Overall, this is a bull market until proven otherwise, and at the monthly time frame, it's even much clearer. This is a bull market until proven otherwise, so don't panic just because price is moving lower and finding support. Someone's asked me to go over my two targets for XRP, 28.84 for the main count and just over $3 for the alternate. This is my main Elliott Wave count. From this low to this high, 5 steps forward. From this high to this low, 3 steps back. Impulse, double zigzag, labelled wave 1 at cycle degree, wave 2 at cycle degree. Wave 1 lasted 3 years, wave 2 lasted 2 years, really good proportion. I expect wave 3 to be a long extension. That's the most common situation for a big third wave for a cryptocurrency. Within wave 3, wave 1 at primary degree lasted a year, wave 2 at primary degree lasted just over a year. 5 steps forward, 3 steps back. We need 5 steps forward, 3 steps back. Wave 3 at 28.84 would reach 14.72 times the length of wave 1. That's not a Fibonacci ratio. That's how long this third wave was to this first wave. So the only reason I've used that number and calculated that target is that is what the last big third wave did. So if we see something similar happen again, then for this wave count, that would be a very reasonable target. At the weekly time frame, the low here is this point here. Now we're zooming in on the structure of primary 3, leading expanding diagonal for intermediate 1, double zigzag for intermediate 2, or intermediate 2 could continue lower as a triple zigzag. This has a lower probability because triple zigzags are much less common than double zigzags. So simply based on the Elliott Wave structure and the probability of occurrence of that structure, this has a lower probability, which means it's more likely that the low for week beginning 7th of April at 0.4309 for XRP will remain intact. From the main weekly chart, this low here is this low here, moving lower, a little bit lower today. I see minute wave 2 now continuing a bit lower as a double zigzag. Now this low is below this low so far. Last time I published this wave count for you, I had minute wave 2 complete here as a single zigzag, but I left the invalidation point down here at 0.4309 to allow for exactly this possibility. It's entirely possible the zigzag or the structure could continue lower as a double zigzag. Single zigzags are the most common corrective structure. Double zigzags are also reasonably common, but less common than single zigzags. So this had a lower probability, but the first idea is now invalid, and this idea is now the main wave count. And I left this here to indicate risk. So if you're panicking about these 2 downward sessions for XRP, I would strongly suggest, if you're new to trading, you stop trading cryptocurrencies with their extreme volatility. You have to allow for risk. Good risk management is the most important, and if you're panicking about this downward movement and you haven't allowed room for price to move to allow for some risk, then you're not managing risk well. Go and learn to trade on something like Euro-Dollar with much lower volatility and much easier to manage your risk, and focus on risk management. Now my other big long-term target is just over $3, and this is why. This wave count is different. Instead of wave 1, wave 2, we've got wave A, wave B. So the biggest structure here is a zigzag. The biggest structure for the main wave count is an impulse. This wave count considers XRP is going to behave a little bit more likely like a fiat currency. On fiat currency charts, you'll notice that they form Elliott Wave corrective structures, which makes the bigger picture quite often very difficult to understand unless you know your Elliott Wave really well. Fiat currencies have a tendency eventually to disappear, and that makes sense in Elliott Wave terms for them to be a corrective structure. When the corrective structure is complete, the market just disappears and it's replaced by a new currency. For this wave count, this expects that when the zigzag is complete, XRP would just disappear and be replaced by something else. It would just be gone entirely. So this wave count needs a 5-wave impulse up for C, and at 3.1861, C would reach equality in length with A. So if this is the correct scenario for XRP, that's a reasonable target. It's still going to take a while to get up there. It could take a year, it could take several years. This is an entirely valid wave count, and we won't know for quite a while which of the 2 scenarios is going to play out. But for the short term, they're both bullish. Daily technicals for XRP, it's broken below what was resistance at 46. Now, if the 4th of July can close below that point, we will have a downward breakout below prior support at 0.46, and then use the target from the ascending triangle. Ascending triangle here, downward breakout. I calculated this target for you at 0.4227, but I said don't use it until we see strong support at 0.46 broken. That may be what's happening today, and if price can close below that, then yes, you can use this target. There's also support below at 0.40. Now, I would not expect XRP to move much below 0.40, if at all, and this target should be a reasonable expectation. Now, we are possibly getting a downward breakout, but you need to wait for the close of the 4th of July session before you can have confidence that we have closed below support at 0.46. The last completed downward session has some push from volume, so yes, we may be seeing more downward movement. For the short term, the volume profile favours that expectation. XRP gave us a bullish signal from on-balance volume, but that's been quickly negated as it returns back below this purple line. So a new widening range, so not very helpful, no new signal. It looks like on-balance volume for the short term isn't going to be very helpful for XRP. ADX is flat. There's no clear trend, but it's not going to take much to turn the black ADX line up and again indicate a downward trend, which would again be extreme, but not nearly as extreme as it can get for this market. Now, if we do see a pivot develop on price, then on a closing basis, there's going to be bullish divergence between the 13th of April and a new pivot to develop. But again, wait for a pivot to develop before you identify any divergence. It's premature, in my experience, to identify divergence prior to a pivot in both RSI and price developing. This is a pivot, here's another pivot. Wait for a pivot in price and RSI. Money flow neutral. ATR declining. Not a lot of strength in this downward movement. Volume really has declined and volatility is declining. It looks like a counter trend movement. Stochastics reached oversold. Price reached support. Price is coming down again, testing support and possibly moving below. We may see stochastics move again back into oversold more deeply before this downward swing is complete. And that's it from me today with your update. I hope you're all having a lovely day, and I hope you're all having a lovely 4th of July holiday. If nothing major happens for 4th of July, I may not give you an update for that day. If we see some strong movements in the cryptos, then I'll update it for you. But otherwise, I'd like to have a little break on that day, because I don't get holidays, but if New York is closed, I like to take that day off because that's the only pretend holiday I'm ever going to get.